we had some fun. There was about 90-something people at that potluck, and we had a lot of fun, and there was a lot of good food there. We had Santa Claus there. Nobody does a better Santa Claus than K7BUX does a really good job. And if you haven't seen the pictures in the newsletter, the pictures are in the newsletter, and if you didn't get a chance to sit on Santa's lap this year, there's always next year we'll try and get him back. We had a lot of fun at the potluck, so put that on your calendar for next year, or remember us next year. And I know it's difficult around Christmas time, but should we do December 6th? We gave a lot of notice on that, and we had a lot of fun. Am I missing anything? We had a lot of fun. Recap on I wasn't at this. I wanted to be. I really did. A recap on the annual Ninja Santa. Now, Noji organized this, and it was, I guess, they dressed in black. There were several I saw. In the pictures, I saw Karen, and I saw Nick, and I saw a few others there. They were wrapping packages and stuff, and they delivered some packages, I guess, ninja style, to a family in need in Orem, and I guess everybody had a good time. And so check the pictures out. I'm sure there's a few of them in the thing this month, the newsletter this month also. So anyway, a lot of fun to be had. Maybe next year if you get time to do the Ninja Santa. It was a lot of fun. Next thing was a recap. We had 2 nights of the Santa Net, and both nights went about 45 minutes only. I think we were scheduled for an hour and a half in case it took that long. We were logged into the 9090. It was available on Echolink, and some people came in other ways. And Santa stayed with us for the whole time. I actually tried to pull him out on us the second night, but we recovered from that. The kids, most of all the kids and those who wanted to talk to Santa on the radio had a good time, and everybody enjoyed. I enjoyed listening to it, so I tried to stay out of the mix until there was a little bit of a lull. I told a couple of reindeer jokes, and that was about it. So we just tried to keep it going. Anyway, there was a lot of fun to be had. So next year we'll probably do the same thing. Probably do 2 nights: Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve, both nights on the 7th, 6th, and have a lot of fun that way. One more thing, I don't think it's on here. This is that's James's time. Not to my own horn here, but how many people have a J-pole? One of the J-poles I know. Look at the hands. How many have multiples? Hey, there's a lot of them too. Okay. I've built about 4,000 of those things in the past 8 years, and a lot of those times, the guys will get a story about somebody built me one, and I never aspired to this, and 4,000 antennas later, and I'm still building them. I don't even know why, but the guys need them, so I keep building them. I had a lot of fun. Well, I had a friend of mine come with me. I want Steve to stand. I want to introduce Steve, N7 SWP. He's gonna come. He sits next to me at work. This is Steve, and everybody knows that there was a guy that gave me the first one. It's all his fault. He gave me the first one. Everybody should know that Steve is the one that built me the first one, and I've been building them ever since because of that. So
I told him I assume no liability.
He's even bought them from me later on. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to Steve, and so everybody gets to know the guy that started it all here. And it's like I say, I'm not tooting my own horn. He's the one that started it all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. I told you this before, you should have numbered them.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I got. I think the next person up.
Carl.
Go on. Oh yeah, we got a tentative date for the barbecue, for the 7-6 barbecue, June 1st. Lynn, I don't even see him. I know he's here somewhere. He's right in front. We got a tentative date for the barbecue on the 1st of June. We tried to move it up a week just because everybody was having a hard time getting in from Saratoga Springs and stuff because of that business that was going on out there every year, and they were kind of feeling excluded. So we tried to work an extra week up until June 1st, and hopefully that will all happen, and that'll be at Highland Glen Park. So put it on your calendar for June 1st, and thank you, Lynn, for stepping up. It always takes a Highland residence to get that park going. So anyway, anybody got any questions on any of that?
Carl?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make mention, I was the one that kind of royally screwed up on the Ninja Santa. I thought it was the 76er Santa Net, and I was the one that kind of
Yeah, that was a little confusing there. No big deal, we recovered. Anyway, thank you, and James, you're up.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's talk activities for a minute. I know you're all excited about Winter Field Day. I got all the information from Jeff, and so we are set up for the Linden Marina. So 26, 27, put it on your calendars, come out. Hopefully it will be warmer than it is tonight. Hoping it warms up a little bit so we don't all freeze to the marina out there, but it should be a lot of fun. So I'll be getting out a sign-up list here in the next week or so. We're going to need a lot of equipment. The club does not have enough equipment to do this on our own, so we're going to rely on a lot of you to provide warm spaces to be in, radios to operate with, masks, all sorts of things, generators. We need a whole ton of stuff. I've got a big long list from Jeff. So I'll be getting that out. Hopefully many of you will sign up both to provide equipment and also to come out and be operators out there as we go through Winter Field Day. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay.
How many stages are we going to do?
We're going to do 3 again. We're going to set up 3, same as before. So we're looking at instead of a D expedition, an L expedition to Antelope Island. So we're looking at mid-August for that. So kind of a close expedition to go out and have fun on Antelope Island. So if you're interested in doing something a little bit warmer and maybe a little bit closer, not quite as far away as a distant expedition, then look forward to that. And then swap meet set up for late September. We'll get that organized, get information out to you. And yes, we are, where are you at? There you are, hiding in the back. Yes, we are still doing field day as well. So as soon as I get Winter Field Day under my belt, we'll get started with the committee on field day. I have one other item as well that's not on the agenda here, and that is, I'm curious how many of you would be interested in doing some type of a build night type activity, maybe once a quarter, every other month, something like that. I'm thinking we start, a half hour early or an hour early before the regular meeting. If you're interested in coming in, building I don't know, an antenna out of a tape measure or any of those sorts of really simple sort of projects that we could work on. How many people would be interested in that if we did it, quarterly, every couple of months? Okay, so quite a few. All right, we'll try and get that organized, figure out some interesting things for people to do. So just generally antennas, people interested in antennas, besides Carl. Carl was in the building. We've got a few for antennas, basic radios like CW radios for SOTA, that kind of thing. Got a few.
Arduino.
Okay. What's that?
An Arduino night would be fun.
Arduino night? Arduino fans, okay? Or Raspberry Pi, that sort of thing, right? Same deal? All right, good. Okay, that's what I wanted to know, just kind of how interested people were in doing things like that. Perfect. All right, thanks. Let's see, service. Noji, you're up, buddy.
Want to say something else? Let's see, we have a bunch of service opportunities, but they're the usual ones that come up for us, things like UCARES, Utah County Amateur Radio Emergency Service. If anybody in Utah County is interested in joining UCARES, please let some of us know who are part of it. CARES has a big role in that. I'm part of UCARES, there's a bunch of us who are. Please contact us if you'd like to be part. It's a great way to get a lot of training. Reed, right over here, used to be our emergency coordinator in that and did a great job. And in fact, he tutored me in a lot of UCARES things. It was a lot of fun. So love to do this kind of service if you're ever interested. Also, there's TERP, the Timpanogos Emergency Response Team. I do this every year. This year is going to be very busy. I'm questioning if I'm going to do it as much this year as I did last year, but it's always fun to be able to go out camping for free, and hiking the mountain with your radio on your back. But anyway, so there you go. If you're interested in doing something like that, again, talk to one of us. I know a bunch of us who've been doing that. Steve and Paul and me. There's Joe, others who are part of TERP. So there we go. And then there we go. RACES. This is a Utah State thing. So anyone who wants to be part of the Utah State RACES, the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. Let one of us know. We can get you started. We'll show you the website. You can get on there to apply and so forth. Now, and in conjunction with these things, there are many other opportunities for service, but I'm not going to bore you with those because we're going to be limited on time because I want to give Clint as much time as we can. But I'm going to turn 2 minutes over to Mickey wherever he is. Go ahead, Mickey.
The key for what I'm going to talk about is utahsag.org. I have a calendar for this whole coming year up on the site now for the things that everybody's told me about. The person in charge of activities for your group needs to get in touch with me so I can get your activities posted as well. We got about 350 people in our mailing list, so when we're trying to get volunteers for events, I got a big mailing list. Coming up January 19th, or 18th, 19th, 25th, and 26th, we're doing a technicians training class in Taylorsville, in conjunction with Utah SAG. On Wednesday, February 13th, in Taylorsville, at the Taylorsville Hamnet meeting, we're going to be doing a storm spotter training. This is going to be put on by the National Weather Service event, Skies up in Salt Lake. And on February 16th, we're going to be doing an extended class on effective net control and how to be a support coordinator for events. Again, all these things are up on Utah SAG and the events list are on the calendar, or if you want to talk to me about it, I'll be here all night.
How many new hands do we have here today? All right, new hands. Go ahead and stand up if you're on this list, or even if you're not in your new hand. Hopefully you're on the list. All right. And then, are any of these upgrades here tonight? Okay, so we are now ready for our presentation. There you go.
Plug things in and have you vent for a second.
All right. Yeah, I just want to introduce Cliff really quickly.
Clint.
Cliff just got through speak or standing up.
Yeah, I may actually stand out here so I can get a front view.
Do you want to?
Oh, yeah.
So this is Clint Turner, KA7OEI, and he is a past president of the Utah Amateur Radio Club up in Salt Lake City, and well, overall in Utah, but at any rate, he's been a prominent figure in amateur radio throughout Utah for many years. And tonight he's going to give us a presentation that I personally have been waiting for quite a long time. And I'm not going to say any more, just to turn it over to him. So Clint, please go ahead and take it away.
Take me a moment to see, can I guess I have to lean way into this microphone. Why am I, oh. Is that, you get it to talk?
Does the other end of the cord have to be plugged in?
Send the right one. So that's
UVARC wouldn't have problems like this probably.
Oh. Shut off.
Out there when you wake them up, okay. Oh, no, that's something.
Yeah, I tried this earlier and it did work. Of course. Oh, there we go. I think I went to sleep on this. Okay. There we go. convenient that it's quick. First of all, a quick visual tour. Okay, now, I don't know if that raised more questions or what, but let's see. How many of you have used the WebSDR? How many do not know what it is? Okay. Well, as you can imagine, you probably guessed it's a SDR that's on the web, but it's intended to be a shared resource on the web, which means you don't need a radio of your own to use it. The idea behind a WebSDR was to share some sort of unique resource. And for example, geographic diversity, if you've been on HF, you know that some stations are heard well in one place but not the other. Or if you could just get your receiver to California, you could hear the Utah stations during the VINet or vice versa. And also, it takes advantage of a special site, like if you have an RF quiet location, you can use that. You know, one site let a lot of people use it. And is again, you can give access to users who can receive frequencies or bands, which they might not have access. They might not own a radio, they might not have a very good antenna for it, they might not even thought of using those bands. So, how did it, and it can be used by a lot of people at once. The current limit on the WebSDR in northern Utah, I think it's 75 users per each of the main servers. I think the one in California, KFS, is about 90. So, and you can see there's that was last night capture. There's about 40 people there on just the yellow server. And there are 40 people up there. I've seen upwards of 70 on there. And between all of the servers, over 100 at a time. And each user has the ability to tune to their own frequency independently of mode. So what you're doing has nothing to do with anybody else. You can just do your own thing, tune, set your bandwidth, set your frequency, volume, whatever. And that has a great advantage because you just have one resource that is shared from a lot of people. Now, you might wonder how it came out. Mostly it's the work of that guy. He's an admittedly somewhat eccentric doctor at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. I guess he kind of started as a lark. What happened was that he had access to a 25-meter radio telescope, and who doesn't? And he wanted to see if it was possible to let other people use that radio telescope, because it's not very easy to get to the Netherlands in the middle of a field somewhere. So what he did was he just cobbled together a program that would allow just everybody to listen to the same audio, or the same audio passband on a receiver that was tuned on that radio telescope for moon bounce. That one thing led to another, and back in as far as 2008, he started beta testing and unleashed this thing on the world that we now know as WebSDR. And to this date, well, as of a couple of days ago, there was 174 of these things all over the world. You can see the geographic separation is a bit spotty. Where Europe is well covered, North America is surprisingly not. There used to be a bunch of them in Australia, but I don't know where they went. And there's a few of them in South America now. But they're all over the world. And being that they're on the web, you can get access to them from anywhere you can get a good internet connection. So if you want to read more about it, you can go to the WebSDR.org site. That's a good one to remember because that'll give you the landing point to everything. Gives you a nice map, list of all of them. And they're kind of listed in order of busyness. I haven't figured out how they're quite listed, but the busiest ones are usually at the top, the least busy are the ones at the bottom. And a lot of that has to do with geography. Like one in the Netherlands has a couple hundred users because there's a lot of people in Europe and it has a decent location. And there are WebSDRs that cover from practically audio frequencies all the way to 10 gig, the different bands. I haven't quite figured out what the 10 gig ones are for, but if you wanted to listen to 10 gigahertz, it's near Lisbon, Portugal, be my guest. And now, what is it essentially? It's somewhere tucked away, there's a PC, probably running Debian or Ubuntu. The software isn't open source, but he'll let it be available to anyone who expresses some serious interest in putting together a system that works, that does something that nobody else's system does. Mainly because he's supporting this for free. He's pretty patient and he'll answer questions, even though he's proctoring several doctoral students himself at the moment. But if you think you have a really quiet HF site or something like that that isn't really well covered, he'll be happy to give you the software. The hardware, mostly it's on a PC. It will run on a Raspberry Pi, sort of. It'll run one band, because Raspberry Pis are kind of wimpy in terms of processing and I/O. And how would you get RF into a computer, or a Raspberry Pi, you might say? Typically you use a sound card of some sort and one of the soft rock receivers. How many of you have seen the soft rocks? Okay, what they are is they're dirt simple hardware. There's a local oscillator, which is the thing that tells you where the frequency is, and it essentially converts all your audio RF around your frequency into audio. Well, after all, that's all any receiver kind of does anyway. but it is very effective and a very simple way to do it. I'll get to it in a minute, but the hardware is very high performance and very simple. The other way is with the RTL-SDR dongle. Now, some more of you have played with these, haven't you? Okay, get this, for about 20 bucks, I should have brought one with me, I might have one in my bag. Little dongle, about 20 bucks. It'll tune all from HF through about 1.3 gigahertz. It'll tune FM broadcast and all that. And you say, what's the catch? Well, it works. It kind of works. It can work pretty well if you have it right and look at it correctly and give it nice filtering. You know. Oh, yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, we have a bunch of these up there. These work well for VHF, UHF, and they'll work at HF if you use them in a way they were never designed to do. But these are actually the best things for the buck ones, the RTLSDR.com ones. I'll get back to that in a minute. And those allow up to 2 meg of spectrum per device. That's not 0 to 2 meg, that's, you tune it and 2 meg slice of wherever you are. Now, we'll get to more details on the hardware in a minute, but you may wonder about that video you just saw. It looked like it was in the middle of nowhere. Well, it kind of is. West of Corinne, if you've ever been on the road to the Golden Spike National Historic Site or to watch Cycle blow up rocket motors, you've probably driven past it, maybe not noticed it. And it used to be an abandoned research site. And how we came into it is sort of a weird story. The history of it was that around 1973, they installed 2 big beam antennas, they're like periodics, on 80-foot towers. And from what we can tell, they were used for research for HF modems. Did you know that they were doing HF data in the early 70s? Well, it kind of had to for secure stuff. Actually, they were doing HF data in World War II with encrypted voice, if you're wondering. So they've had a long history. So they needed somewhere to test all this stuff, and they chose this remote site away from most everything by Corinne. So they put up these big, huge towers here. And things seemed to go on until the site was abandoned sometime in the 80s. Paperwork's kind of sketchy. Then suddenly, around 93 or so, it was reactivated when another research project came up and an omnidirectional log periodic antenna was put up. That's a picture of it there. You saw it in the video. Interestingly enough, if you drive past it, you probably would never even notice this antenna, even though it is taller and has like 115 wires on it. And it was used for ionospheric research, or for an ionosounder or a trip sounder. Anyone know what a trip sounder is? Okay, how many of you have been just sitting there listening on HF, minding your own business when you heard tweet, somebody switched past your frequency? Everyone, that is actually a research tool going on. What they do is there's a transmitter, usually about 5 or 10 watts, that starts out at about 2 megahertz and just transmits while moving frequency continuously up to about 30 meg. They mute their output on certain frequencies like military and search and rescue frequencies and like that. But what they do is it's on an exact schedule. In fact, there are websites you can go to where you can, and programs you can download, you can synchronize your clock and a computer-controlled receiver to it. And from between you and where the transmitter is, you can see what the ionosphere is doing and what bands are open. And they can actually do like 3D holograms of what the shape of the ionosphere is and how transparent it is to different frequencies. And that's what that was. And there are a lot of them around the world today, but they pretty much help verify the models on prediction of HF communications, because HF is used an awful lot by the military still. It was actually, quote, rediscovered in Afghanistan because they realized that they couldn't get from one valley to another without having to put repeaters on hills that get shot at. And then, I did say that there were 2 of those beams up there. You might have noticed something in discrepancy about the video. There's only one of them. In about '06, one of those came down in a windstorm after the deadman pulled out of the ground. And so for about 5 years, there's this maybe a couple tons of angry metal, tangled metal laying on the ground. And a couple of years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, I guess they hauled off the antenna, but they literally hauled off the tower and dumped it in the bird refuge, hoping nobody would notice. And then, but they didn't use those antennas, either beam for chirp sounder as far as we know. And around '08, the funding stopped for the chirp sounding, and the site was abandoned. As far as we can tell, it's almost like they just shut the door and walked away. And it stayed like that till 2 years ago. And Michael, a KC0JRA, I don't think he owns a 2-meter analog radio. He does a lot of DMR. He owns some businesses. He owns a wireless internet company and consulting company in that area. And he was asked by the landowner about demolishing the thing, so to put in a bid. So he got there. He kind of seen it, didn't know anything about it. Then he got there and said, wait, this looks like HF. I don't know anything about HF. Who can I call? So he talked to several people in the Davis Club. He actually called me, since I'd known him kind of for a couple of years already, and said, if it's worth the trouble, would it be my worth trouble having the landowner kind of put a hold on this demolishing until we can figure out what to do with it? So, and he did that. I mean, he kind of got wind from the people he talked to that, yeah, we can do something with that, don't know what, but he kind of put the hold on the demolishing, and as long as we were to kind of keep it cleaned up a little bit and put it to some sort of use, the landowner said, well, my cattle can run here whether it's there or not, so it's fine with me, just clean up the mess. We're still working on that part because there's a lot of mess to clean up. And it was eventually decided that a receive-only configuration would offer the most bang for the buck for the most number of people. Now, the WebSDRs have kind of been a little secret for a long time. Like the one in KFS and where in California? I'm drawing a blank. Half Moon Bay. There we go. Has been around since like 2014 or so, but it really didn't get much use in the past couple of years. And kind of word of mouth sort of thing. And we kind of figured that, well, one of the problems with Half Moon Bay is that only half of its coverage area is useful. How many people live in the middle of the water to the west? No, not really. And how many people live in the east on the west coast covered by it? And there's this problem with 40 meters. If you've ever checked in on 40 meters, you know that the band is a quote a local band in the daytime, but not really. Anything closer than about 150 miles, you can't talk on, but more than 200 miles, it's okay. So we figured, well, somebody might find it interesting. So we decided to put this whole thing together. And I was there in December, the last day of the year in 2017, and we decided what we were going to do. And right then and there, he got on the phone with Utah Power and said, "How do we get the power back into this place?" Well, it took until late February 2018 before we could do that. Michael had to plant his own pole. There's a little pole there, and because it could only be a quote temporary power connection. We're still working with them on that, and they were kind of reluctant to light up the power line. In technical terms, it's an open delta 2100 volt feed, and if you know anything about powers, that was obsolete in the 70s, and they really didn't want to turn it back on for us. So we kind of goaded them into it. And the other thing too is we're only guaranteed dirty power. Our voltage is somewhere between maybe 90 and 140 volts, maybe. It's usually around 120-ish, but it goes all over the place. But we had to sign a little waiver saying, if we blow your stuff up, don't worry, don't come crying to us. We're actually a spur off another feed that feeds a compressor station for a pipeline. And when that compressor fires up, all the lights in the building go dim, the UPS beeps, and we hear this big, huge jet engine taking off in the distance. But, you know, power is power, and it's a way to go. So, on the last day of February last year, we finally got this thing up and running. Michael, who actually owns an ISP for that part of the state, you know, was kind of a natural. He just connected into his network. So he donates the internet connectivity for free. You know, he has a couple of gig of wireless, gigabits of wireless just running all over the place in the northwest corner of the state. So it was convenient to have him on board. So you might think that after all that stuff that big antenna of the beam would be the one to use. Well, you would be wrong. Only one antenna is currently used for HF reception, and it is that funny wire sort of thing. It's 92 feet tall. This has about 115 wires on it. You go up, and you can't make heads or tails out of it unless you stare at it for a while, and only if you know what kind of antenna it is. And even then, you kind of scratch your head on, how can that thing possibly work? That's kind of like Carl's antennas. You know, there's no wire connected to some of the elements, but they work. But that antenna, you know, is a small thing. It's 92 feet high, and it takes a 250-foot radius footprint. So the thing would not fit in my yard and my neighbor's yards. And it was designed for transmit coverage from 3 to 30 meg. You know, that INSON sort of thing? You can imagine what kind of antenna you would need that would be flat-ish from all the way from bottom of HF all the way to the top. Well, that's one of those. We actually got in touch with the manufacturer and asked, you know, the engineer was nice. We asked, well, how much would this cost? Well, the antenna was 90 grand and another 75 to install it. So this thing ain't cheap, and that's why it was abandoned there too, because it wouldn't be worth taking down. And they're used all over the world. KFS has the same antenna, by the way, except theirs is starting to fall in the ocean because the coast is moving inland about 5-10 feet a year, and they're not sure what they're going to do about it. Even though it's designed for 3 to 30 meg, it's actually usable down to about 400 kilohertz, which includes 160, the AM broadcast band, and some of the newer bands that we have that a lot of people don't do much about. And its sort of polarization is kind of weird. Higher up, it's horizontal, although if you're pointing skyward, what is horizontal? I guess it's kind of like that, but it's omni, so it's every direction, so it's not favoring any particular direction, but near the horizon is circular. Now, that's kind of interesting because if it's circular polarization, which means that the wave screws its way through the air, it doesn't care whether you're vertical or horizontal polarized, which means that, and that's kind of important because when you transmit on your vertical or your horizontal antenna, with the wind of the ionosphere rotates it one way or the other by the time you get to the other end. So that some of that fading you hear on HF, say, is not because the signal faded out, it's just that it turned the wrong way for your antenna. And anyone who's had multiple antennas, like a horizontal, vertical, and quick with a switch, one can say, well, wait, you disappeared on my vertical, but you're fine on my dipole. That prevents that, so it's kind of a mixed blessing. It was designed for short to medium range HF communications. Does that sound like any other kind of antenna you're familiar with? What antenna have you heard of that's good for short range? There you go. It is technically kind of an NBIS antenna. But the pattern looks like that. So you can see straight up and out to about, out to about 20 degrees, which is like this high. It has pretty decent gain, and that's at 8 megahertz, which is roughly 40 meters. And it looks like that pretty much all the way through short of 20 meters. And at 17 elevation, which is good to out about 1,000 miles-ish, it's about unity gain, which is about the same as typical vertical or something. One of the things to remember though is that gain really doesn't matter on receive. I don't know if people think about an antenna because they want to use it for transmit as well, but on receive, the gain really doesn't matter on HF. It's the directivity that matters if you want to improve something over another antenna. So even though this antenna has fairly low gain near the horizon, we're not transmitting, we're not trying to get a signal out, and we have amplifiers that will overcome the weak signals coming in, so we don't care about it. Like a really good DX antenna is called a BOG, beverage on the ground. It's just a wire laying on the ground. That is like -10, -20 dB gain, but that's one of the best DX antennas you can use if you have a quiet ground. It's not because you don't want to transmit on it, because nobody will hear you, but it works great for receive. So the gain doesn't matter so much. And as it just turns out, just the way it works, it actually does develop kind of lobes at higher frequencies. Like that's at 15 meters, what it looks like more or less. Has a bit of gain, which favors DX on those bands a bit more if they were open, but they ain't. And even though it's primarily DX, and primarily short range antenna, it still works pretty well for DX because the gain goes down toward the ground, but it's not gone. So it does pick up signals. Plus, even though we have a few power lines off in the distance from it, it's kind of quiet there. And if you don't have any local noise, it doesn't really matter if you don't, it doesn't really matter as long as you can hear the signal. Now, as I mentioned, it has wires, lots and lots of wires, and there's a drawing of it from the brochure. And that's only half the antenna. Facing in and out of you is a whole other set that looks just like that. And in real life, it looks like that. So, I call it a thing of beauty. It might look confusing to some people, but that's actually a thing to behold. If you walk up to it, it's very impressive that anything like that can possibly work, let alone how they possibly got all the wires up there without getting confused. And it's built really well, even though it's been up there for about 25 years. It almost looks like it's the day it was put in. How about that other antenna, the big, huge beam? Well, it's on a 80-foot tower. I've been to the top. It's okay. It's 19 elements. The boom is only 72 feet long with only 87-foot long elements. And it only weighs 3/4 of a ton. And it's way up there. It was actually made by High Gain. Nowadays, High Gain, you might think, is owned by MFJ, but they actually split it off. So the commercial part went to the US Antenna Products, and the amateur went to MFJ, I believe. They still make this antenna. You can buy a new one if you want. And it has about 10 to 13 dB gain over a range of 6 to 40 megahertz. So it'll work from 40 meters on up, not quite to 6. And it's rated for a measly 50 kilowatts PEP. But it kind of makes sense because they're using this for HF modems. We were talking to somebody who was familiar with the site, and back in the 70s, they were telling us that they used the modem signals from this on SAC bombers when they would fly from the SAC base in Nebraska up to somewhere TDY up in the Pacific Northwest and use it kind of as a homing beam. And I could believe it. We found evidence of the power feed in the building that they might have had like maybe had a 50,000 watt amplifier in the building at one time. So they were running some heavy duty power up here originally. It's all gone now, of course, otherwise you'd have the strongest signal. There would be a really strong signal on the band, wouldn't there? Now, the takeoff angle is pretty low. It's a good DX antenna, but there's a thing about it. It doesn't have a rotator, and it's fixed to 87 degrees true, which means just a smidge north of due east. Now that probably kind of makes sense because they're probably using it to cover the eastern US. But if you notice, it really doesn't cover, it covers South Africa really well, and the white lines, and then sort of the red lines, it kind of gets to Southern Europe. So it wouldn't be a very good Europe antenna, and it's really hard to move. And And also, we're not using it at the moment because there's no feed line. Looks like somebody saws all the feed line about this far from the top of the tower, and it's laying in a big mess at the bottom. Why they did that and didn't take the copper, I don't know, but we're going to work on hooking it up at some point and perhaps having a just east-looking set of receivers, because why not? It's there, like Everest. Why not? Because we can. Now, we talked about one antenna, many receivers. If you've been on the WebSDR, in fact, let's go over here. Let's see here. Gotta drag this over on top of stuff. I know where my mouse went. Yeah. Not having a local screen is a bit of fun. Okay, if you've been to the WebSDR, this is what you'll land on. Now, what you can see is there are a lot of bands here. Each server can do up to 8 bands at once, quote bands, and a band is the portion covered by a particular receiver. And what you see here is what's called a waterfall display. Anyone who's had a modern radio, like a 7300, will knows this. Horizontally is the frequency. You can kind of see the frequency on the bottom. And the brighter the lines are, the stronger they are. And of course, it moves through time. So you get frequency, strength, and time all in one handy shot here. And what you can see here is there's quite a few stations here. Like, let's tune in this guy here. We know that's a sideband signal, both by the frequency and by the way it looks. You get to learn about these things. And let's see, tune that in a little bit better. And who knows where this guy is? We can listen to him for a while.
I didn't know that.
Oops. The guy's on the dot 5. There we go. And right now, 40 meters is kind of in that mode where we're in the deep winter part and it's going long, which means that it'll start opening the DX. Although it's not, Utah's in a weird place geographically. We're not close enough to Europe to work in 40 meters very well, and we're too far from Asia for it to work really close. So we're kind of in that dead zone here. So right now you can kind of see, I happen to know that this is a foreign broadcast out of Europe right here, and there's some, who knows what up here. But we can go down to where the action is. We can go click. And we see a lot more activity on 75 meters. And we can click if we wanted to go to an end. These little labels change between day and night. And I kind of picked the more common nets. But you can kind of click on one and end up, it'll snap you right to that frequency and mode. But you can see a lot of signals up there on 75. Even on 160, we'll see some signals there. A little bit weak, some kind of weak ones, but you know, I don't have terribly high noise at my house, but if I listen here and listen to the half-decent antenna I have at my house, I would think that I was listening to 2 entirely different bands. Like, for example, this signal isn't very strong. Oops, see, I'm mistuned. I'm so far away from the screen I can't tell where I am. These guys are probably back east, I'm guessing. But 160, that's sort of called a band that a lot of people don't do much with because you think you need gigantic antennas. Whereas the real trouble is trying to hear, because a lot of stuff, there's a lot of noise down there from your house. Well, something like this can help that. And of course, just for fun, we have, on this particular WebSDR, we have 3 servers to cover all the bands. Let's see, where did my cursor go? For the heck of it, because we had one of those dongles and they only cost $20, we can cover all of the AM broadcast band and put WWB there, and also we want 60 meters. Well, one of the problems with 60-meter frequencies is that they're scattered all over the place. So bigger than one of our that's a narrowband receiver can handle. So we get not only 60-meter hand band, but the 60-meter shortwave broadcast band, which is over here, and also the 49-meter shortwave broadcast band over here. And this is probably what is it? WTWW in Nashville. If you've ever tuned across it, they seem to have mostly hand programming, 100 kilowatts station in Nashville with mostly hand programming. But anyway, back to, see if I can, back to the, I'll talk about that, more about that in a minute. So we have lots of different receiver modules. But there are two fundamentally different kind of receiver modules. I call them the narrow band, which are single band, and the wide band, multi-band modules. You kind of saw a bit of that. If you noticed, there was an 80-meter phone, 80-meter CW, and 75-meter phone receiver. And there's a good reason for that, because, let's see, well, first of all, it took a lot of modules. You can see lots of modules here. Pretty much all these are hand-built, bespoke modules to work for a specific function. So a lot of time was spent winding toroids. Lots and lots and lots of toroids. But anyway, snap out of that. But in order to hook that all together, you need a lot of stuff tied together to accommodate both the wide and narrow band receivers. You need a lot of filtering. For example, KSL's transmit signal up there is what is it? It's 100 billion times stronger coming into the antenna than the weakest signals on, say, 20 meters. That's not an exaggeration. It's 100 billion times stronger. So you can imagine what would happen if you didn't get rid of some of those signals. So to make this whole thing work, we need some wickedly strong signals. In fact, the signals are so strong. We have some barbed wire fence kind of in the general vicinity, and plus the towers. And those just re-radiate mixes of call 700 AM, KSL 1160, and WKIHU 1010, all of which run 50 kilowatts during the daytime. And they all kind of mesh together, so if you go down to 160 and 75 in the daytime, you can kind of see stuff. That's just radiating from bits of metal all over the place. There's nothing we can do about it. Fortunately, everybody but KSL goes to low power at night, so they kind of go away. So, to accommodate that, we have a very simple filter network, okay? We have to get rid of the AM signals all in one fell swoop to go to the wideband receivers, which I'll talk about in a moment. And each individual band has its own filter, so we don't get everything else into those bands receivers. And so so when this is designed, we kind of wondering about which way is this technology going to go? We're going to have individual band receivers or ones that cover all the bands all at once. Well, right now, the only practical way to do it with current technology is just to have individual receivers that cover small sections of band. And I'll tell you why in a moment. So we designed it both ways. One to go to the narrow band ones for filters for each band, and the wide band one. And that's kind of what it looks like. Whoops. That's the one that gets rid of all the AM broadcast band and amplifies and sends it off to the wide band ones and sends it off to the left of the narrow band ones. I tend to nerd out on these things, so sorry if some of you are falling asleep. So, and the narrowband filter thing, the problem got even more complicated because you just can't take an antenna and start splitting it, because every time you split a signal, you lose 60% of it. And if you have to split it 16 ways or 18 ways, you're going to end up with most of it being gone. So have to come up with special diplexing filters that take off for each band. And you only lose about 20%, which on HF, trust me, is nothing. Because HF is so dang noisy, you could lose most of your signal and not miss anything in the first place. Plus, that gives the advantage that all the receivers are already well filtered. And There, that's what a lot of toroids look like. Yeah, so. And the advantage of having these narrow bands is they're kind of cheap and kind of simple. What you need is just a sound card. Most of this stuff is done with 16-bit audio sound cards. Now that might sound kind of kludgy, but ever heard of the Elecraft K3, KX3, KX2? They all use just sound cards with these receivers in front of them. It's literally, the front end of it is literally about $8 of hardware that does all the mixing, and then a sound card to do all the heavy lifting. So you can get, the disadvantage is that you can't go any wider than your sound cards go. So, but the advantage of it is that you can use a 16-bit converter, which is relatively cheap, if you know about these things, and you have to filter it anyway, so you can't get a lot of signals in a lot of the other ways. Now here's kind of a little secret that ICOM doesn't really advertise, but you've seen the 7300 to 7610. They would be awful receivers if they didn't have a crap ton of filtering in front of them. They would be absolutely disastrous because they cannot handle everything coming into them. So they have things like they tout the digicel. Well, it's a feature, but it's kind of a necessary one. You have to limit it in there because you cannot, even today, you cannot affordably make something that will receive all of HF and digitize it all at once without some terrible compromises. One of them is you kind of have to filter and only let in where you're listening. So we kind of take care of that problem by having a narrowband. And it only needs moderate CPU power. You might also be wondering, why is it that we just can't take all 30 meg at once like the ICOMs do and pull it in and have everybody be able to tune 0 to 30 meg? Well, you cannot buy an affordable PC to this day that has enough processor power to do that. It takes fairly heavy lifting on a lot of GPUs, if you know what that is, graphic processing units, just to crunch that data, and that data will not fit in 1 gigabit a second for 0 to 30 meg. It just won't fit. So by having only a little portion of bands, you can only the parts you're interested in, you can kind of get what you're interested in. And the ICOM example really doesn't work because, like on your own receiver at home, it can hear the whole band, but it's only listening to what you're listening to. On a system like this, you have to listen everywhere because you don't know where everybody's going to tune. So the narrow band, well, sound cards only come up to 192 kilohertz. You know, it was dang inconvenient for the FCC to define our bands in 100 kilohertz increments for the most part. So we can't cover full bands easily. And so we have to use multiple receivers to cover like the 75 meter band or the 20 or 40 meter band. So the simple way around it is, well, we got the soft raw kit. $21 is a kit for the receiver. There's a lot of $21 is up there. Then we had to marry that with a synthesizer, $18 from QRP Labs, and it feeds 3 receivers. And it has really good stability the way it's been modified, way better than most radios. And since those little prog rocks can output several frequencies, we can run 3 receivers at once with one of those boards. And this is one of the example receivers. This is the 20 meter receiver. One side is the bottom half of 20 meters, the other side is the upper half of 20 meters. Each goes with their own sound card. 75 meters takes 3 of the dang things, so I had to cram them into this box. So lots of tiny wiring in there. Now there's another way to do it, and I mentioned it before, those little dongles he had. Those, and in the same category, there are several kind of wideband modules, like the narrow broadband modules that cover up 2 to 10 meg. That's like the dongles. They're from 10 to 30 bucks each. The ones that he showed are the best ones of that class. They're about 20 bucks. You can get something like the SDR Play. Those are in the $100 to $300 class. Those work a little bit better. They cover up to 10 megahertz. They take a USB 3 port. And then there's the wide ones, which things like the Hack RF, which costs 300 bucks, which actually doesn't cover HF, but you could convert it, but it's only 8 bits. The Red Pitaya, which is really expensive, which is a cool box. Then the Kiwi SDR, which is $300. But unfortunately, we can only use the RTL SDR, but I mentioned those because I'll come back to them in a short time. Now, that looks like the box that he handed me. They're dirt cheap, of course, but they cover 1.5, 2 megahertz bandwidth, which is why we can cover all of AM, all of 60 meters, but we also, and also tunes over quite a range. So we can use it to cover HF bands as well as part of 6 and all of 2 meters. Why not? The disadvantage is they are cheap. So if you don't buy a known one, they can have really bad components on them, have board layout that's terrible. So all you hear is noise the board and your computer generates instead of signals off the air. The quality is all over the map, which is why we stick with those. And they only have 8 bits of A to D conversion, which means that, well, put it this way, that 8 bits is only, what, about 8 S units in range, which isn't a lot. And it's easily overloaded or underdriven, so you've got to put the amount of signal to just right. One dirty little secret is if you hook one of these up to an HF antenna directly outside, it will not work. It'll be overloaded or else it'll be not enough signal to make it work. So you kind of have to finesse things, which requires a lot of filtering to do it. But we use them for bands that would take a lot of bodies, like 15 and 10 meters. It wouldn't take a whole lot of those 192 kilohertz sound cards to cover each one of those bands. And they're not open very much right now. And we use them to cover some of the shortwave broadcast bands, and as I said, AM. And as I said, VH 6 and 2 meters. So, when we first put it on the air, it looked like this. We had what? We had only a few bands. We had part of 160, top of 75. We had 60 meters, because we could, because one of those dongles. 40 meters. And we had the one that covered the AM broadcast band. And it was kind of a nice, orderly rack. Nowadays, it's kind of messed up a bit. We keep adding stuff on top of it. I don't even know where all the wires go anymore. But so we had to go up there for some servicing last weekend. We did some upgrades, added some more. Added another receiver, and then like what happened the next day, one of these sound cards lost the USB port and took out part of 40 meters and a bunch of other things, so we had to go up there, and we had lots of fun chasing out the cables. We're going to do that at some point. But now this one covers every single amateur MF, LF, and HF band that the US amateurs have, plus parts of 6 and 2, and a whole bunch of shortwave broadcast bands. So there really aren't more bands that we could cover on HF easily right now. We could improve some of them that we have. And another thing too is we have WhisperNet coverage on all these same bands. How many of you know what Whisper is? Okay, so for those who don't know, Whisper, you can run a receiver and a computer program that will take the audio from a sound card to receive digital transmissions from other stations all over the world, and with them you can figure out what propagation is. Likewise, you can hook your computer or have a standalone beacon that will transmit signals for others to receive, and it's used for determining what propagation is like. You can also use it for testing your antenna, see how good it is or isn't. And we have a bunch of those up there, and I'll get to those in just a moment. Now that I've told you what it is, you might wonder why you might want to use it. Don't know anything about HF yet? Well, go here and go to the WebSDR site, that's websdr.org, and you can play around and listen to receivers all over the place and hear what's on the band. Now, that might be overwhelming and not make a lot of sense, but you really can't go wrong with local reception on 40 meters, especially during the daytime, because you'll hear stuff, and you'll figure out what's going on and what propagation is. If you don't have an HF gear and want to listen, this is an obvious one to do. How many of you have compromised antennas at your house and can't hear very well? That's getting increasingly common. And how many of you might have decent antennas, but have lots of noise. All right, now, noise is becoming an increasing issue. First of all, if you have noise, if you have try to receive HF and you have a lot of noise, remember this simple rule. Most noise begins at home. Because if you have lots of noise, it sounds like power line noise, it's something in your house. Most likely it's something in your house. And you gotta swat it out. If you have a phone charger, let's see, something that uses a wall wart, an electronic device, how many of those you fall in that category? All those can make some terrible noise. In fact, those little wall warts are the most offending things. You know, the typical wall wart will last like, plug into the wall, wall cube, will last like 12 to 18 months, and it dies because of maybe 30 cents of component failure, but most people just throw it away and get a hold or whatever it was. But when those start failing, if you're listening on HF and you've already fixed your noise problems, that'll come back, and your HF reception will end, life will end as you know it, when those are about to die. So if it was good and this is about to die, look around your house and try to find a hot wall wart. But anyway, having a remote receiver can kind of circumvent that and kind of inspire you to, well, if they can hear that, maybe I should be able to as well. So hopefully people will do that, just instead of just giving up and go only with the WebSDR. But if you want to use the WebSDR, that's fine with us. The geographical diversity is another thing too. Were you at the question?
I had another reason, but maybe you'll get to it.
Okay. The geographical diversity is another thing. I touched on this earlier, like on the Beehive Net. If you go to the Half Moon Bay WebSDR and the Utah one, you'll see a lot of people in the same places because people in Salt Lake can't be heard on the northern Utah one, but they can be heard in California. That's just the way the band works. So, also, if you're in a round table or something, maybe Bob lives in South Dakota, but 40 meters between Southern California and South Dakota doesn't work very well, so they'll hop on the Utah one so they can hear everybody. That makes sense. If you're away from home, you can actually run the WebSDR on your phone. It runs on iOS under Safari as well as under Firefox and sometimes Chrome on Android. So if you just want to listen to something, you can do that. Maybe you just want to listen. One of the things I find it easier to do, if I would just want to listen to what's on HF, I find it easier just to fire it up and listen on the nice computer speakers in my shack that I can turn up or whatever, rather than turn on the radio. Plus I can see at a glance. I have an old TS440, and this has a nice waterfall, so I like being able to see where all the signals are. So I just use it just to listen a lot of times. And as I mentioned before, check out some of these new bands. Well, like new to you perhaps, haven't been on 60 meters or 160. Why not just to figure out what's going on? The other reason why you might use a WebSDR is, and this is a really fun one to do, is to test your own station. If you notice here, let's see here. There's let's see, where is it? I'll point it out here. Scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
There's their,
Below the volume.
oh, there it is. There's a record button right here. So if you're running, if you are transmitting, one of the things you probably discovered if you've been using any kind of transmitter testing it, you cannot transmit and try to listen to yourself to see how something works. Besides the squealing and all that, your voice sounds funny to you anyway. At least mine does. And when you're talking, you really can't wrap your head around if there's something wrong with your own audio. So you can set off the record, make a recording, and play it back later to say, well, maybe I had maybe my highs were maybe I was too tinny, maybe I was muffled or something like that. Or maybe there's some distortion or there's hum on my signal. If somebody complains about something that's on your signal, the thing to do would be to go over here, flip record, and play it back later to find out if it's true or not.
Can I ask you question about something right there?
Sure.
How come the volume is always about 3/4 default?
Yeah.
Blows me out of my shack every time.
Turn your speakers down. I tried to set it low, but I got complaints because everybody said that, well, when I go to yours, it's low. When I go to everybody else, I get blasted out. Too low. I have to turn it up. So I have to set it where everybody else's WebSDRs are set.
Okay.
So just turn your speaker down. Sorry about that. I tried, but I got complaints. But anyway. Okay, so you can test your own station. Also, you can check propagation between your station and the WebSDR. Like, for example, how many people know that 160 and 80 meters is actually open during the day really well? Dirty little secret. 160 and 75 meters and 80 meters covers about a 500-mile radius really well during the daytime. How many people live within 500 miles of Utah? Oh, if you lived in the LA area or back east, there's people on those closed nighttime bands all the time. Like, for example, years ago we used to do the Friendship Cruise, which involved speedboats on the Green and Colorado rivers and in quarter-mile deep canyons. We used 80 meters because it went straight up and straight down. We could talk in the next canyon over, you know, in the Colorado River. We could talk to Salt Lake in the middle of the daytime, and it took. And to replace HF, which is very inconvenient, it took some pretty hairy repeater systems to do that. But HF, 160 and 75 meters just goes straight up and straight down and blankets this whole radius, and it doesn't quite have that same dead zone that 40 meters does. So, if you want to test your 80 and 160 meter antennas, daytime's great because nobody's on there, because nobody lives other in Utah. I mean, near Utah, other than people in Utah, they don't get on the band. Also, if you just want to see if the band is open somewhere, like for example, there's some WebSDRs back east, and if you want to see, well, does my signal actually get out to Pennsylvania or Washington, D.C. area? Well, guess what? You can tune over there and find out and see if you can hear yourself. As the 20 meters sounds like it's open to Europe, can I be heard in the Netherlands on 20 meters? Guess what? You can find out. Why not? You can also learn how the bands propagate, because you can try those bands to see what works. Now, one thing that I found a bit freaky was that when the WebSDRs first came up, I was listening on a WebSDR in England one time, and this is like 2 or 3 in the morning on 80 meters, and I could hear all these British people talking, and I thought, you know, I don't hear anything. I didn't know the band was open. I don't think the band is open in England on 75 meters. It's 2 or 3 in the morning. So I tuned there on my station at home. This is before the Northern Utah SDR. I could barely hear signals in the background. So I just sent out a CW signal, and sure enough, on the one in England, I heard my own carrier. I probably could have gotten their attention, but all these things in the background, you don't know they're open unless you try, necessarily. And another real fun thing to do is to test antennas. Supposing you have more than one antenna here, like a good example is, how good is my mobile antenna compared to the antenna on my roof, compared to a vertical or whatever? You can find out. You can, one of the features that the WebSDR has, in fact, is a graphing feature. Let's see, let's find a signal here briefly. That's 75 meters. And that guy's good enough. You want to see how strong he is over time? Well, you can look at the S meter, of course, right here, but that doesn't tell you a lot. And this is you can actually graph it here. Now those last 2 values are exclusive to this WebSDR because I decided to add them, but you can see what the signal looked like over time. So what that means is you can put out a signal of your own, do a few test transmissions on antenna A, then on antenna B, and see how good or bad a particular antenna is. Now, keep in mind, a vertical and a horizontal antenna may propagate differently. Remember, as I said, sometimes vertical gets turned to horizontal and vice versa. You kind of have to worry about that a little bit, and the bands go up and down. But so you want to do some A/B testing back and forth. You want to test at different times of day, but you can actually get a pretty good idea how good or bad your antenna might be. And I did an example just last night. I have an HF antenna this is on 160. I have an antenna that I can run as a top-hatted vertical, and I have a 9-band butternut on the roof of my house. And you can see the blue parts. I was on the vertical on the roof, then I went on vertical, the top hat vertical, then I went to the butternut on the roof in the blue one. You can kind of see the one in the yellow, the butternut's a little bit weaker, but not a lot. And you can kind of see the band going up and down, so you can see that they're probably about a half unit apart. It's really, this is a much easier way than trying to get an opinion from someone who kind of look at their S meter and trying to squint and say, did it really go up that high or not? But this is a really good way to test their antennas. Well, that's true. There's a friend of mine, he built an antenna for a friend of his for 40 meters, and it was just a modified outbacker. And he wanted to make it the best. It was going to be used on the metal roof of an aircraft hangar, so it could only be 12 feet tall because of the height limit at the airport. But the guy wanted to get on HF, so he wanted to make it the best antenna he could. It wasn't going to go on a car anymore, so he put a little top hat on it and made some improvements. But he wanted to see how good that 12-foot tall antenna would work on 40 meters compared to his full-size 40-meter dipole. Well, he lives in Arizona, but with this SDR and several others, he determined it's about 1 S unit worse than the full-size antenna, which is pretty good for a mobile antenna when you jump through all the hoops.
Clint?
Yeah. Did I hear somebody? Yes?
We gotta get out of here.
Okay. That's right. Okay, I mentioned what browsers work. Might wonder why you can't transmit on these. Well, 100 watts of RF versus the weakest signal is, I said these silly numbers before, 100 watts of RF is about 100 trillion times stronger than the weakest signals coming from RF. So we cannot transmit from these sites. It is a real technological problem to be able to transmit on nearby frequencies on HF. So we really don't do it. Even at field day, you have to put the antennas far away apart. So this will never be a transmit site. And also one transmitter nearby would wipe everything else out on that band, so we can't do that. How about a rotatable antenna? How would you rotate something that everybody's using? Would it be by voting? You tick a lot of people off. So if we add more antennas, if we wanted to make that big antenna rotate, we wouldn't. We'd add a smaller antenna pointing in a different direction on there. And what about something that can cover 0 to 30 meg at once? We actually have receivers there now that'll do it. Standalone ones I would demonstrate, but we got to get out of here. But you can get on there, and they can only handle 8 users at once, but they can tune anywhere in the 0 to 30 meg. And what else is up there? I mentioned WhisperNet. We have all the bands covered, so the site up there is in the top 10 of the United States and the top 20 of the world on accumulating all the whisper hits, all the transmissions to determining propagation. I'll go to a big database you can find and all that sort of thing. So, quick questions, anyone? Yes?
Question. What help do you need? Do you need money? Do you need
Okay.
bodies? Do you
Well, you might ask how this is supported, I guess, when you bring up the money. We do have Google Ads on this, which I hide because I have an ad blocker because they annoy me. And they just barely paid the power bill and the site rental. We have a decent, but Michael and I and other people are probably cumulative, probably out of back pocket about $3.5, $4 grand on all this stuff. And that doesn't account the recurring cost, but that's covered by that. We do get donations. We have a PayPal link on there too, so we appreciate that. So, but anyway, anyone else? Yes.
Is there a website you can get more information on this?
Yeah, it's the okay. That would have been a really good thing to put up there. If you just Google Northern Utah WebSDR, you can't miss. But it's WebSDR1 Actually, if you just go to utahsdr.org, you'll be thrown at it. And just utahsdr.org. And there's links to the main WebSDR page that shows them all worldwide and all that stuff. Anyone else? Yes?
I noticed there was a schematic on there for muting audio,
Oh.
a couple of schematics on that.
Oh, yes.
That might be a good thing to do for the project days or whatever.
Quick.
Parts and stuff for that, availability?
To very quickly explain the problem, if you're using WebSDR on the net, you key up, you hear yourself delayed by half a second, it drives you and everybody else crazy. So, but what all this is a relay that keyed by your push-to-talk radius mute line that mutes your computer speakers. That's all it is. Dirt simple project, people want to build it, I'd recommend that. I built one, the drawings are on there. It's not an original idea, but it's really nice to have.
Clint will wind the coils for you.
It doesn't need
That
coils.
needs
Oh, no coils.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed there's two there. Which one do you think is better? I mean, they look both pretty simple.
One of them accounts for having an amplifier or not. I have an amplifier in my house.
Okay.
So usually you use the same line the keys are amped to mute the speakers, but if you want to also key the amp, then you need to jump through hoops. Anyone else? Okay, well, the time flew by quickly and my voice held up, and some of you are still awake, and I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Clint, for being here and for taking your time to do this. I appreciate that. Now we're going to move into, we don't have a lot of time here, we're going to move into our door prizes, which is the very last thing. We're going to make an abbreviated door prize though. And so I'm going to turn it over to Karen. So Emma?
One more, right?
Just the A double.
Okay, you get to pick one more. Okay, so this is for the ARRL 1 year membership, and it's ticket number 04914311049. Nobody?
Nobody wants an ARRL membership.
Okay, so go again.
Next.
1431013.
There.
Hold up. Come on, get the picture, come on.
Okay, so this one you get to pick either the radio or the Carl Pucker's antenna. 1431007.
Going on?
1007. Going once?
Not yet.
All right. Which one do you want? Radio? Antenna. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so this is for the antenna. 1431040. Okay, no one claims it. It's going home with me.
I've already got one, draw somebody else.
Everybody needs one.
All right. 1430996.
Awesome.
Congratulations. Okay, that's it. Really quick note, for those of you that work events and that during the summer and you're part of UCARES, this coming Tuesday, we're doing a really important meeting on Aries Connect. So if you could be there, that would be great.
Thank you all for coming. Sorry to keep you all so long. Appreciate your indulgence. Good luck and happy hunting.
Where's the?
Announce Apollo Burger.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that, so anyone who wants to join us, we're going to go to Apollo Burger for our after meeting. And it's just 452 North State Street, just north of Waterfall Display.